Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to day one of the MBA Summit 2021 version. The event is sponsored by the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business. And today we're here to speak about the future of work in the MBA. We have three terrific guests. Let me introduce them very quickly, and then let's get into the meat of the discussion. And I just want to remind you that this is day one. Day two tomorrow features our admissions panel with Sujin Kwan at Michigan Ross, the head of admissions and the MBA program. Really looking forward to that, along with admission directors from Wharton and Kellogg. So you'll want to join us for that as well. But let's deal with today and the future of work. I have with us Rich Lesser, the CEO of the Boston Consulting Group. Rich earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and then earned an MBA from Harvard Business School. We have Brandy Pitts, who is an alum of Ross, earned her MBA there in 2001. She's global head of partnerships digital marketing at Facebook. And we have Sue Ashford, the chair of the Management and Organizations Department at Ross and a professor, obviously, at the Ross School of Business. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
So, Rich, let's start with you. You know, as the CEO of BCG, I think you're pretty in a good position, really, to answer this question. What does the future of work look like in 2022 and beyond? We've been through an incredible period now, and everyone is wondering, what is the new normal?
Well, first, it's great to be with all of you today. The way you framed that question, John, I just want to start by saying, we're all in such different places in what our reality is right now. I know this is a global audience, and I think all of us are feeling just incredible concern, particularly for colleagues and people in India right now and what they're going through. And in their fields, talking to our colleagues, it's really, really hard. So talking about the future, I think we just have to be cognizant of how different it feels around the world and those challenges. And of course, our hearts go out to those that are struggling with this, at this moment. We don't know where we'll be in 2022, but we know where we won't be. We won't be in 2020 in most of the world, and I think the vast majority is my hope. But we also won't be in 2019 because we've learned an enormous amount. And I think that what the most frequent discussion I have with CEOs across industries is about how they want to think about bringing people back to work, what future work models will be, and how the 2020 was a huge forced experiment. None of us asked for it, none of us wanted it for sure, but we were forced to adapt, and we've learned an enormous amount. And so now we can come back differently. And our expectation, when we think both about ourselves and we think about the clients that we serve, is that we will have many more experiments and different models underway. I think 2022, the second half of this year in many parts of the world, and 2022 will be periods of enormous learning where people are trying different ways to bring people back, recognizing different parts of their organizations will need different kinds of elements of how much in-person time together, what they can do over Zoom or other technologies, how to get the balance right, and how to make it work to build sustainability for the world, sustainability for individuals, and continued high productivity, in many cases higher than we experienced before the pandemic. Just a couple principles is we really believe most leading companies will look to involve their communities in the design of those. So employees, customers, suppliers will play an important role of setting it. We believe you need to run experiments and not just jump to the new model. We're a little concerned of people who are announcing now what it will be when everybody comes back, because we think there will be periods of time in order to learn. And in order to learn, like in anything, you need to not just try something, you try something, capture data well, try different models, see what works, and expect to iterate over time. But I think we'll be in a quite different world of work in 2022 and beyond than what we've experienced in 19 or in 20.
I'm imagining a more hybrid kind of workplace where, while it won't be remote, there'll be more opportunities to be remote, and there'll be less travel. those long distance trips for a single meeting, and then you take the red eye back, will probably disappear in favor of a Zoom, don't you think?
I do. I'm very optimistic that we're going to have new ways of connecting. In fact, I wrote about this not so long ago, and it's the thing I got the most feedback on was different models of meetings. That leadership needs to start by modeling different meetings, because if we start modeling that everybody's got to come back in the room to be with us, then that will cascade down our organizations. What we've learned is we can do sessions like this. You lose something. It doesn't mean every meeting should be in this format, but many of them can be more productive. So I think we'll see different ways of leadership teams and meetings occurring for at least some portion of the work. I think there'll be more hybrid formats. And I certainly think there's an opportunity to change the travel models that we're seeing right now. And not to not travel, at least certainly not in our world, there will be travel, but to do it in a more purpose-driven way and less as sort of a default of what you do all the time, and to leverage what we've learned to be able to operate quite differently.
Brandy, what are you seeing, and what is Facebook's look at the future of work?
Well, I think that this period of time that we've all collectively lived through has really provided Facebook an opportunity to think differently about how and where we work. And our focus is really to use remote work as a way to elevate our work to better serve the world. And one of the ways that we believe that remote work will help us here is actually providing us an opportunity to access new pools of talent. So we won't just simply have to be confined to a certain cluster of large cities. This actually, we are hopeful, will help us improve diversity, because it will actually give you an opportunity to look across geographies. Not everyone wants to move to the Bay Area. Not everyone wants to live in Chicago, where I live, which I think is a great place, but it's a little cold for some people. So I just think it's an exciting time, especially for me, to think about this is a method for us to improve diversity. And when you think about the next 10 years, we actually do expect a large portion of our workforce to be remote. And that's really based on demands. But as Rich talked about, we want to make sure that we're moving forward in a very thoughtful way, and we're iterating, because we really want to make sure that our employees are able to gain the same level of fulfillment in their work, from everything from training to career progression. And importantly, we want to make sure that our culture remains really strong. I joined Facebook in July of last year. So that meant that I was hired virtually, I was onboarded virtually, which is quite the unique experience. When you think about that, I've never met my team in person. Yet we've actually been able to achieve a lot of amazing things that we're super proud of over that time, really all over video conferencing. And so that's where technology comes in. It's a very important underpinning to everything that we do. At Facebook, we actually use one of our products called Workplace, which you can think of as the work version of the Facebook platform. And it has many of the same features that everyone's familiar with, like the ability to build community with groups, share information, chat, broadcast live meetings. And coming from a very email-heavy organization prior to joining Facebook, I do believe that this has been a key part of why we've been successful at transitioning to remote work. I've been able to feel the Facebook culture, even though I've never stepped foot in an office as an employee, which again, when you talk about this out loud, it just sounds so crazy, but this is where we are today. I've actually worked on virtual teams for a long time, so I've been a believer. But in all of the years that I've done that, there certainly has been this old notion about remote work equaling decreased productivity. And all organizations are seeing that that just simply didn't hold true. So I think it's provided a really fantastic opportunity to change the mindset of many, many people. And I'm just optimistic about what's to come.
I have had a similar COVID moment. My wife and I actually bought a home 3,000 miles away without ever stepping foot in it. I mean, it's just part of our crazy new world. Now, Sue, you recently co-authored a paper in the American Psychologist Journal on COVID and the workplace. I'm wondering, what do you see as the most enduring changes or biggest questions moving forward?
Yeah, thank you. It was a bunch of work psychologists who got together and thought about that issue based on our research and things we were also seeing. And I would echo, certainly the work from home is one of those, the most prominent in all of our minds, but not the only one. But that suggests that, people need to be like Brandy and learn how to lead virtually. I think that's something that everyone should have on their agenda if they're entering the business world these days. Also learning how to deal with being alone a lot and social distance and not being near coworkers and your boss. I think there's skills in self-management are going to be key to survival and success. But I think of the thing you need to develop most is some sort of agility, flexibility, and proactivity, because we don't know what the new normal is going to be. And I thought Rich started us off in a good place, saying it's going to come in different ways for different places in the world and in different paces. And I'm not sure that that sounds, calling it a noun makes it sound stable, like it's going to be a new place we're going to go to. Whereas I think we're going to be in a period of flux and change for a long time. And something in Brandy's comment is suggestive of the other thing that we focused on, which is there's also new challenges for organizations, which is really how they think about the ecosystem of their talent acquisition, and talent management. Jeff Schwartz at Deloitte has written a lot about this, and I really think he's onto something, which is we can no longer think of our talent as our set of full-time employees, so supplemented by a few part-time employees. But now it's going to be people we just buy slices of occasionally, we pull into projects, and firms that learn how to manage that ecosystem better are going to be more successful in whatever is coming in the future, which is going to require a lot of adaptability.
Sue, are people happier when they work remotely?
It's a mixed bag. Some are, some aren't. Some love the freedom. I actually, in a study of independent workers, we ended up titling it "The Agony and the Ecstasy in the Gig Economy." So there's the ecstasy, the feeling of freedom. You can do what you want when you want. For them, they could produce what they want because they weren't working for a firm remotely, but they were working on their own. But the agony was, in addition to these things that are obvious, like how do I support myself? But it's like, how do I keep my identity as whatever I am in the workforce when, I'm doing it out of my kitchen? And how do I connect with other people? The emotional toll was much higher with more oscillating and stronger emotions. So people are kind of on both sides of that spectrum. I have colleagues that are looking forward to being back and colleagues who basically never want to come back.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Obviously the MBA experience is very dependent on social interaction. And so is consulting, because it is at essence a relationship business. And it's obviously also one of the big career aspirations for many MBAs. So Rich, I wonder, with a lot of MBAs and alums in consulting, how you see this changing. What will consulting look like in the future? Will people continue to live out of their suitcase from Monday to Thursday? What do you think?
I think it's going to change in ways that are on the whole going to be really positive. I'm really excited about this next generational model that we're all inventing together in a couple senses. The first is, we've made commitments to a more sustainability. I mean, we made a net zero commitment last September. We were the first in our industry to really put that forward. And we talked about reducing emissions 30% per FTE by 2025 and to go further beyond 2025, which meant we were already committed to bringing down travel intensity substantially. But I think this whole experience has taught us, first, we can get there and probably get there faster. And second, we can do it in ways that are delivering at least as much value to clients. I would argue more for some of what Sue just alluded to. We can now mobilize expertise from around the world much faster and much more effectively. And I think people really, our clients really value that. They know that when we've been talking about trying to bring the best of BCG to clients for a decade. but our ability to do it has only gone up in this period because just the logistics of getting people there. So for younger people joining us at the associate level, at the consultant level, my expectation is part of why they join is to be on the super steep learning curve. That means getting exposed to a range of situations. It does mean being with clients, you know, with your sleeves rolled up together, tackling something. That will continue, but it doesn't necessarily mean being there 4 days a week, 4 weeks a month, right? You can do it with very different models. It means learning from an apprenticeship culture and learning from people around you. Some of that should be maybe traveling together or sitting in a conference room together, but some of that can be having access to an expert you'd have never had expert to in a different part of the world. So I actually think that we have a lot to learn. As I said, I won't repeat that, but I think it's going to be a better experience, better for clients, for the planet, but particularly for our people, to make it sustainable, to keep a steep learning curve, to get the right kind of balance.
And Rich, when you say bringing the best of BCG to a client, I'm imagining that if you have an expert in sustainability in Shanghai, rather than flying that person across the world to your client's location, that person can zoom in for a particular meeting, right?
Exactly. And when I think about a longer term career in a world, a lot of the reasons people wanted to be here, but maybe not for the long term, is for a while the travel and the intensity was great, but it just gets harder as you get, you know, deeper into your life. But now I just talk to people deep into their careers who are in Europe early in the morning, in North America at night, and in helping someone in Asia, I mean, in the day, and helping someone in Asia in the early evening. It could have never happened before. And they do that from, you know, where they live or from the office that they'll be in once we can all go back in. I think that the sustainability and the level of contribution is going to go up, and we already see it. I mean, we're so much busier than we would have ever expected to be, even in a normal environment, let alone in a pandemic. And I think it's because we're actually more productive in this world than in a world where you're traveling. Now, that doesn't mean you can't never be with the client. We do need to be back, and we do need more. This model isn't for the long term, but the balance between the two, I think, is a real win-win, even much more than I would have guessed if you'd have asked me, you know, 15 months ago, how's it going to work if you can't be with clients, you know, a high portion of the time? I would have never guessed it's working as well as it has turned out to.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think we're working on that balance issue as well as an MBA program, but you know, we shift more towards wanting more in person and still valuing that, but being able to take advantage. I'm working on trying to get a couple of people from Silicon Valley to teach our psychology of startups class, for example. They're never going to come to campus, but it's that opportunity to pull in special resources.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I think that, you know, the technology has improved to the point where this is all possible, as we've discovered during the pandemic when we were forced into it. I mean, only a few years ago, the technology even wasn't even there. It wasn't available to make this as seamless as it is. Now, a lot of MBAs today are very, I wouldn't use the word obsessed, but I would say that a priority for them is combining purpose and passion with their careers. And in all the years that I've covered management education, I've never seen this more true. In all of the MBAs that we interview on a regular basis, and we interview thousands of them every year, this theme of purpose and passion comes over again and again. And Brandy, you're in a spectacular place where you're actually being able to do both, right? You're leading the global digital marketing and leading the marketing for Facebook Elevate, which is the learning community dedicated to accelerating the economic success of Black and Hispanic small businesses while pursuing a great career at Facebook. Do you think that MBAs in the future are going to be able to do both and that will be commonplace?
I do. First, I'll say I'm really grateful that I'm able to work across a variety of verticals, everything from gaming to media. And then on top of that, I talk about the Facebook Elevate program as being a gift, because for me, it's the very first time that I've been able to work on a program that directly benefits my community. And, Facebook Elevate is really focused on providing digital skills training, mentoring, and support to help Black and Hispanic small businesses and even job seekers and creators and nonprofit leaders increase their economic impact. And that in itself is it's a lovely gift. And one of the things that personally for me has come out of the pandemic is I'm always going to seek these opportunities to balance both. So I love that the MBAs of today are wanting to do the same. And I would say in terms of the ability to follow both passion and purpose, I'm going to flip that around and put that back to the individual, because I do want MBAs to remember they have agency in choosing which employers they want to share their talents with. So finding companies where you see the possibility for these opportunities is really important. At Facebook, I've been so impressed in the time that I've been there because they have an openness in allowing individuals to create and follow these passions. After making a business case, of course. The Facebook Elevate program was actually created by an employee back in 2018 who saw an opportunity to help small businesses in her community. And this started off as a volunteer side project for her and many other employees across the company. And now it's her full-time job. And I get to dedicate a sliver of my job to it. So you can create opportunities for yourself. So I would say, find organizations that give you the opportunity to spend time on causes that you care about. And in order to really do that, the first thing MBAs have to do is really hone their craft. Because if I didn't have the great education from Ross and my brand management training and consumer products from Kraft Foods, I would not have the marketing skills required to amplify the benefits of Elevate, to let the community know that we're here and ultimately engage them to help them drive success. So you can't just say, I want to follow my purpose and my passion without taking the time to make sure that you have the skills to successfully do that.
Yeah, true. And I've seen a sea change in the way organizations go to market and in recruiting of MBAs, in emphasizing things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, passion, purpose. Rich, I'm sure that's part of the value proposition at BCG today, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I really liked Brandy's agency point. I really think sometimes particularly people earlier in their careers can underestimate the power of their own agency to shape what they want to do and where they want to do it. And I've talked for years, but I'll come back to the way you phrase it, that I see young people really generally focusing on four things. One is incredibly steep learning curve in a world that's changing faster and faster and building a depth of capability. The second is and that was Brandy's point about you got to invest in your own skills. The second is having real impact. Like in today's world, people don't want to feel like they're slogging away for 15 years before they can really be making a difference. And how do you have impact? The third is culture and community. And I think this emphasis on purpose, on being in environments, we would phrase it as sort of leading with integrity, being driven by values, this sense of being parts of community that they like, it means so much to people. And I think it's so important to be a thoughtful consumer of information as you make the decisions around that. And then finally, getting balance, which for any individual, the balance you want at one point in your life may not be the balance you want at another point in your life. So what you're really looking for the first discussion is place that at some points in your life will tilt you one way, maybe heavily to work or more travel, and other times you can balance it in a different way. Those four elements, different people weight them to different degrees, but those are quite deep for many, many people to get that. And the agency to think carefully about both where you go, but also what you do when you are there to make the most of it. I think it's something not to lose sight of in the hub of building your own career and just working really hard at what you're doing.
Yeah, I like the framework. Go ahead, Sue.
Well, I was just going to say, we actually have a class for a few years now called Living the Good Life. And it really is a class that engages students in those exact issues so that they both can start wrestling with it and find their own agency.
Yeah. And the only other, just one other thing that I would build on to say is, if you personally decide you want to be a force for good, it's lovely to be able to do that at work, but work is just a part of your life. You're a whole human. You can find things also to do outside of work. So finding that right balance, because to Rich's point, you may not have the opportunity at every stage of your career to be able to integrate that into your job, but again, that's just one part of your life. So really think about how else can you help the world and the community even outside of work as well.
Yeah. I like that framework of the 4 aspirations of young people today, because in a way it anchors you at a time that's incredibly unsettling, right? I mean, there is so much uncertainty, there's so much ambiguity. And I wonder, Sue, if you have some advice for MBA candidates in wading through this uncertain world and not only surviving, but thriving and growing and learning on the journey.
Yeah, well, I do think not waiting for it to be over would my first piece of advice, because I think it's going to be with us. I think if there is a new normal in a noun form, it is a new normal of sort of ongoing uncertainty, unpredictability, and change. And the more you can get comfortable with that, so that's why I emphasized agility, flexibility, and proactivity. So proactivity is the agency piece, and the agility and flexibility are the ability to change and drop old things and pick up new things. And then the other thing is that don't forget that this kind of world is a real invitation for leadership. We all hope for and want leadership when times are uncertain. We're looking for it because we ourselves are uncertain. So I think it's a time when you can step up from wherever you are and lead, come to be seen as a leader in a way that will serve your career quite well. And it just depends on whether you're willing to take some of the risk, because there will be risk in leading during uncertainty, but it has great payoff. And we also learn a lot of leadership from the experiences we have, and the experiences of uncertainty, unpredictability, and trying to carve a path are great ones to learn how to be a better leader if you bring the right mindset to that experience. So I think it's a good time to learn to lead.
Absolutely. There's never a bad time. And actually, we have some questions from the audience. So let me start with those, okay? What influence, if any, will the Business Roundtable and other corporate leaders talk of a shift to stakeholder capitalism and the integration of social impact into corporate decision-making have? Brandy and Rich, why don't you take that?
Okay, I'll start. Oh. I don't know if it necessarily changes the attributes, but it certainly reinforces something that I look for in marketing hires. So marketing and culture go hand in hand, and culture is intertwined with social impact. And understanding culture really requires curiosity. So curiosity is a key attribute that I look for. You have to stay curious about the world that we live in to really understand how you influence consumers and how you prove that your brand understands them and is relevant to their lives today. So continuing to cultivate your curiosity and just being a student of the world around you will continue to be really important.
Rich?
I would say, first, it's been encouraging. BCG has been talking about purpose now for quite a number of years, and I've been in the Business Roundtable for many years. It's encouraging to see how that purpose discussion has expanded, and how I watch companies going from thinking about it to talking about it to now trying to live it. And of course, in this past year, with the pressures of COVID, with a climate crisis, people recognizing, and of course, a massive challenge on diversity on many levels, and building a true sense of inclusion, allowing people to be their authentic selves. I think it's manifesting itself in different ways. I really like the things that Brandy said. I also would just highlight, we have such a responsibility now that I think is more understood. If you're going to live purpose, it means helping each individual to achieve their full potential, so that people can be their authentic selves in their work environment, so that you find ways to really make it feel that it's inclusive in a true sense, not just in the profiles that you hire, though that has to be the starting point, but in the efforts that are made to help every person achieve their full potential, have every person's views feel welcome, make an environment where you're helping to retain people throughout their careers. And I think that if any organization is talking about living purpose, that's almost the job one. Like that's the starting point of that. And I think as individuals joining those organizations, and particularly with MBAs from a top place like Ross, you're coming in and you are often playing leadership roles early in your career. And that is a core responsibility, not just to look up and see what someone else is doing, but to try to live it yourself every day with the people that work for you, with the people that are around you in your community. I mean, then there are other ways to manifest it in terms of where you have passion and energy, the conversation we had earlier. But I think the starting of how do we make diversity and inclusion live in our environments in authentic ways is like the first responsibility as we become more purpose-driven in our work. And we all can play a role in that.
It is kind of remarkable how the conversation has so dramatically changed from a number of years ago. You know, Sue, a lot of people out there, a lot of critics, I think wrongly attributed the obsession with shareholders and that singular focus on investors for companies with what was taught in MBA programs. I wonder if you have a perspective on how these societal changes and how this altered conversation is impacting MBA curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the question about has the business roundtable affected what happens in business school, partly my answer is not that much, because we've been addressing these issues pretty avidly for a long time. If you go back to C.K. Prahalad's book, the business at the bottom of the pyramid, addressing the poor in the world, and that still lives in our curriculum and in our teaching. We have thought leaders who are working with the UN Committee on Responsible Business Management. We have courses on this. We've had a dean for the last 3 years focused on social impact. We've created the Design and Impact Lab where their students work all year long on a project aimed at one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We even are asked in our annual reports every year, what are you doing in your classrooms and in your research that relates to DEI issues and relates to the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN? I never know how to answer that as a leadership professor. I'm either doing nothing or I'm addressing all of them because I'm preparing leaders to go out and they themselves can address them. So I feel like this is sort of in our wheelhouse, both for students who want to go deep into it, but also it's sort of infused in the school. So, when you're in a regular accounting class or a regular finance class, you're dealing with this multiple stakeholder model and the complexities and difficulties of addressing a multiple set of stakeholders all the time throughout the curriculum. So I'm actually really proud of our school on this issue of social impact. It's something we've cared about for a long time and has only increased over the last several years.
If I could just build on that for just for 1 sec. So just to your point, what was interesting to me about that purpose thing was it was first revealed to the BRT membership in late June. By late July, 160 or 180 CEOs had already agreed to sign up for it. You don't get that much of the business world ready to come on board in a statement that's quite bold, actually, in a month, unless it's already pretty embedded in their belief set. Like, I think that it was less that it changed the world. It was more a recognition of that the world had changed. And a lot of it had started in the ways that younger people were being educated and the expectations of people coming into the work world and building their careers. What I do think is that the emphasis on it and the more conversation around it, I think has made the ground more fertile to go further, which was fortunate because the last year has required us to go much, much further. Whether it's taking care of people and our teams in this challenging COVID environment, whether it's the topic of racial equity and justice, whether it's addressing the climate crisis, we've needed to go much further, faster. And I think there is now a more fertile ground to do that more deeply, and this conversation has helped. But the ground has been laid for years, as Sue, I think, correctly observed.
Now, here's another question from the audience that I think Brandy, Sue, and Rich, you can all take a swing at. If you could recommend one theme or focus area for MBA candidates to concentrate on during school, what would it be to help them succeed in the new normal? Who wants to take that one? Brandy, why don't you start?
This is probably less about the new normal, because there are clearly elements of our work world that are just going to stay consistent, and more so coming from my perspective, which is as a marketer. I think the theme that I would provide to aspiring marketers out there is to really think about your Ross experience as a full, well-rounded experience, which is what I know the school, of course, wants. Because it's one thing to be a functional expert. It's another thing to really understand how business works and how what you do as a marketer fits in and helps other parts of the business drive business or value. So like for me, when I think about some of the best courses that I had at Ross, they were entrepreneurial courses that really helped you think about every facet of business. And then one other theme that I would talk about is the MAP project. So the multidisciplinary action project. I always get that P mixed up. And way back when, I worked on a consumer relationship management project for Tommy Hilfiger. And that was such an amazing opportunity to really have hands-on experience in business school. And this will sound very foreign now, but back then, it really introduced me to the importance of how you leverage technology in marketing. And so really taking advantage of all of the great opportunities that Ross provides and making sure that you don't leave as simply a functional expert, but a well-rounded business expert would be my 2 pieces of advice.
I love that. And I think back to like the movie The Graduate, where the dad takes the young man aside and says, plastics. You go into plastics. And probably in the 90s, we all would have said, tech. You want to go into tech. And I think it's less clear now. I don't think there's an area you can pick like accounting, go into accounting, though the world will always need accountants. But I think it's more that getting that foundation for the long term is such great advice that Brandy gave. I love that. And then the other thing I would say is work on your mindset, your openness to different what different disciplines might have to say or offer, to combining disciplines and perspectives. And I think if you, in keeping that in your mindset and also keeping more of a learning mindset about yourself throughout your career, is probably the thing that's going to serve you best over the long run. And if you can start developing that at Ross, you're going to be better off down the line.
Rich?
So I think I'm going to largely build on what Brandy and Sue just said, but just quickly, I highlight 3 things. One is we've always needed to be able to learn throughout our careers, but we've never been in a period where that will be more important. As I look at people who are, entering business school with, probably, 25 to 40 year career horizons coming out of business school, like the ability to keep learning and evolving is so important, more than ever. And so using the MBA to get a foundation to learn how to be a learner of all this, which means not just going so deep into one topic that you don't get exposed across multiple things. The second is that it's all about teams. And again, that's an old statement, but it's also a new statement. Teams have always been important. But in today's world, the biggest changes inside companies or in the world come with multidisciplinary teams. And that means bringing people of different backgrounds and experiences and perspectives together, learning how to be great, both in a team and leading those kinds of teams. I think business school can really help to start to set the ground, the kind of work you take on, the classes you take, the projects you do, the experiences you choose out of the classroom can really matter. And then the third is that technology is infusing everything. And it will, and the bar between what technology does and people does is going to be a sliding scale for the next 2 decades at least. So not that I'm not a software programmer. It was never, it's not that we all have to be technologists, but we all, in the areas that we have interest in, have to be comfortable with the role of technology and that shifting bar because technology gets more and more capable all the time. I mean, business school is a great opportunity to understand where it is and where it's going and to build some comfort in that.
I love being on a panel where everyone is smarter than me, because I would have run down the rabbit hole and narrowly said business analytics or digitization or globalization. And actually, all of you focus on, the broader outlook or mindset that someone should bring into the world of work, which helps you and sustains you no matter what field you're in, which is, I think, is a lovely advice. So we have another question from the audience. Brandy, why don't you start with this one? Because after all, you have an MBA, and the question is, what's the most valuable thing you've gotten from your MBA that you take with you in your career?
Honestly, it's a lot of what we just talked about.
Yeah.
But I'll focus in on the team aspect, because you cannot get anything done in business without a team. And especially during the time that we're working, and I mentioned I've never met my team in person. My team is all over the world, really. And the ability to collaborate, to drive, shared understanding, shared goals. That is really the center of how we're able to accomplish things. So all of those team activities that we did, kind of starting from really the very first week of your Ross education, that will be very helpful in your career moving forward.
Rich?
I was like a kid in a candy store. I mean, I was an engineer by training, as you mentioned at the beginning, and I love problem solving. That's why I ended up being a consultant. I love hard problems and making change happen. Engineers get to do that. But my field of vision was so narrow in doing that. Engineering was great, but it was just very narrow, very deep. And I came to business school, and suddenly you get exposed to so many different sectors and so many different business situations and so many different functional disciplines. And I felt more than anything was breadth of perspective on what it means to try to lead a business that I carried with me long after I forgot the specific cases or some of the specific, rules and things are just on. But I remember that, and I think that really helped me a lot. And also how difficult the decisions can be, like getting exposure to how do leaders make hard decisions. And it's so easy after the fact to make it seem like there's one simple answer or one obvious thing to do. And I thought wrestling with the challenges that leaders face, whether it's on how to design a marketing campaign or how to change an organization or how to take on a new kind of offering, I think that it really helps to be in the moment, to understand how difficult those choices are, not because it'll make it easy for you down the road, but maybe you'll ask better questions. Maybe you'll involve other people that you wouldn't have to get different perspectives on things. I think it just opens your horizon in a decision-making sense too, which I found very helpful over the years.
So Rich, let's hang with you, because the next question is directed at BCG. How has the pandemic affected employee satisfaction? That's a hard one, isn't it?
I think, I think in general, it's harder to be working alone by yourself. And I would say we felt that, and I suspect that we're not the only business that's felt that. I think there's a lot of people we thrive on the community of being with other people. And you can replace some of that with Zoom. You cannot replace all of that. I think the people who were already established at BCG and knew everybody, it was, it's fine because you have a lot of those relationships built. For newer people coming in, I think it's felt hard. I mean, we cannot wait. And again, it'll be different in different parts of the world. So I'm not putting a date on it because it depends where you are. But over the months ahead, to get people physically back together, more connected, doesn't mean they're necessarily traveling all the time, but just to be back in the office and doing that. I think that is hard. I think on the other hand, it really opened a lot of BCGers' horizons to different ways you could deliver value to clients that didn't require you to be there every day of every week, and different ways of working. I think in many cases they got more exposure because we did so much to bring the world to them on Zoom that they may not have had time or ability to see. And I think the sense of caring in our community at a very human level, I don't mean just leadership. I mean, people just care for each other so deeply. And I think that came through. So for many people, it's kind of a time where on the one hand, you're missing a lot of stuff. And on the other hand, the bond you feel at a very human level, the feeling a part of the institution, of connected to others, if anything, go up because it's such a time of stress. So I would have to say it's sort of mixed. Some things are much harder. We can't get right to get beyond. Some things, you go through a crisis together and you can build some strong bonds, and we've done some of that too.
Yeah, and this relates to the earlier question I asked Sue. Are remote workers happier? And she said exactly that. It's a mixed bag. So Sue, even before the pandemic, you've studied and been a foremost thought leader in the so-called gig economy. And we know there are pros and cons to the gig economy that are played out in the media almost every day. But in this sort of post-COVID world, I wonder what is the future of gig work, and will MBA grads actually want it because it gives them freedom, more liberation, to work on their own different kinds of projects? What's your sense of that, and what do you think it takes to be successful in that world?
Well, I know a lot more about the latter question than the former question, but I do think the bonds between any one organization and any one human are getting looser and looser over time. That's been happening from my parents' generation to my generation to the young people today, where nobody goes into an organization expecting to stay all their life, and they have a sense that they're going to move around. They're more sort of the master of their own fate, that kind of thing. So I do think that most MBAs today can probably expect to have some time periods where they're working as independent workers on their own, in and among stints with various organizations. And I think that the wisdom we learned from studying these folks who do it, and the folks that have been able to do it in a way that creates a vital work life, are going to be valuable insights for all of us, especially if we work in this looser way where we're more remote. And those people created 4 connections that allowed them to have that vitality and remain productive. One was a connection to routines. And I think we've all noticed that as when this COVID time where, we developed our routines to start our day and to end our day, and to keep ourselves being productive. But the more those connections were in place, the more vitality people reported experiencing. Second was a connection to place. And again, I think this one we've all thought about a little bit more. Where is that place I do my work, and how can I make it work for me? And people did that in different ways. Some, it was like tight and narrow. A writer said, I work in a 6 by 8 foot room. Anything bigger and I lose focus. And others, it's in a room that provides some inspiration. The third was a connection to other people. Who am I going to see regularly in my life that keeps me focused and elevated in my work? And then the final takes us full circle back to purpose. People that had a higher level purpose for what they were doing and could articulate it, reported being able to sort of sustain the ups and downs of that kind of work much better than people who were just doing it because they had to, or doing it because they couldn't think of anything else to do. So I think we can learn from people who are doing that full time that will serve us well in whatever kind of MBA job you get, because I think you're likely to be in those positions sometimes. And even when you work in a company these days, the sort of self-management required is much stronger than it used to be.
Yeah, true. I think, Facebook was also a core part of our society, obviously, and how it has connected people throughout the entire world. And I wonder, what connection the gig economy has with Facebook as a social force in the world. Brand, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll use just one example from my own personal life. I live in Evanston, Illinois, and there's a
Hello,
wonderful
territory.
there's a couple of wonderful groups in how we can support Evanston businesses. And what you see are a lot of contractors who come in and talk about things that they can offer. You see lots of suggestions among the community. So I think using Facebook really as an amplification tool to talk about just some of the things that you are able to offer is certainly something that's already in practice and certainly wonderful to see, especially among small businesses.
Yeah, definitely true. Now, Rich, here's a question. What are some of the biggest challenges consulting firms will face in the post-pandemic world? It may be growth is one of the most immediate ones, huh?
Well, we're growing a ton. So I think for us, I really think it's funny when our leadership gets together these days, what the pandemic interestingly accelerated companies' beliefs that they needed to change. That's exactly the opposite of what happened when the dot-com bubble burst 20 years ago, or the great financial crisis happened 12 years ago. In both of those, people sort of hunkered down, things slowed down. I think for 2 months, March, April last year, things slowed down. By June, people are saying, wow, the world is changing incredibly fast and we better be a part of that, or we're just going to be left behind. And so in our world, and particularly for BCG, which is so much about being on the cutting edge of change. I mean, it's the whole heritage of the place. It's how we're geared. This has been a period where I think our clients realize the need for that now, even more than pre-pandemic. On the other side, though, the people side of the challenge, I mean, it's been so hard. We've talked a lot about it. And so when we talked, to me, the challenges that we've got are much more around just continuing to make this a fantastic place for the best people to want to come and to build the diversity we aspire to build on all dimensions, including backgrounds and ethnicity and gender, but also different kinds of skills and capabilities to create the right kind of teaming and connection in a world where we want to travel some, but travel less. Continue to sort of refine models for people to shape their own careers when there's so many more ways to do it. So how do you take the agency that Brandy talked about and translate that agency into a much bigger firm with so many more opportunities, but people need to discover it? I think that, and then the second one we talk about all the time is leading with integrity. Like the world, the expectation and the scrutiny on the consulting world and on all business actually is intense. You know, the Facebook team would feel that as well. Like the world is watching the choices you make and what you do. And how do you make sure that many people are living that day to day in many, many choices that come their way and do that? And how do you create culture that is transparent, that is humble and recognizes it can learn, where people feel free to speak up, where you have real accountability that every person feels? I mean, to me, those are the two things that, you know, interestingly, on the building capabilities that the client need in the world, I think we're going through a period where that will stay very intense for quite a while.
There are a lot of people in our audience who obviously are already convinced that the MBA is the way to go. There are some that I bet are sitting on the fence wondering, my goodness, is it worth the cost, the time, the energy? Brandy, do you have any remorse about your MBA? What do you say?
No, not at all. It was certainly one of the best investments that I made in myself. I had long wanted to achieve a graduate degree. It was a goal of mine, you know, early in my career. I knew that brand management and marketing was going to be what I wanted to do. Right before I went to Ross, I was working in advertising. So I was working with brand managers and I said, wow, I want their job. Let me understand exactly the path that they took. And an MBA was a part of that path. And it certainly provided the pathway for me to gain the position that I wanted, but also, you know, more importantly, it satisfied my need for knowledge and just to continue to expand my own understanding. And along the way, I certainly made lots of wonderful friends and have so many fond memories that it was wonderful. One of the reasons I live in Evanston right now is because it's my version of Ann Arbor. here in Illinois.
Yeah. How did it change you though, Brandy? How did the experience change you?
I think probably a couple of things. It expanded my knowledge for sure, which of course then increased my courage and confidence on the types of impact that I could drive. And then I would also say it helps you understand the possibilities. So that's really important, because even though I went in like having a pretty firm understanding of what I wanted to do, in all of the different courses that I took, it's like, oh, wow, there was another great course back then. I think it was called Disruptive Technologies and Marketing. It's like, wow, that's fantastic. And I could come up with so many different courses that expansion of what's possible permeates my life today.
Rich, could you speak to the value of the MBA today and why BCG hires so many graduates?
So let me separate two things. We're looking for top talent across a whole range. And now we hire so many, but a lot of them are still MBAs, partly because it reflects people who might be more interested in our world on average, partly because it attracts enormously talented people, and partly because it attracts people that I think want to do what we're aspiring to do, which is solve the hardest problems, make change really happen, and build capabilities to not just make change happen once, but to build more capabilities in organizations to allow them to evolve and adapt to a world which is changing rapidly around us. And I think the MBA on all three of those dimensions is just extraordinary preparation. It's not the only preparation. Everybody's got, some people want to do medicine, that we need that too. There are many things you need, but I think as a core foundation of skills, it's really good. And frankly, in a world that's changing fast, I thought Brandy said it so well, like expanding your horizons, both about what you have some understanding of and feel more comfortable to go into new situations and learn, and about what the possibilities are, what can be achieved, what other leaders have managed to do, what others have created. I think that expansion of horizons in a world where there's a lot of change, and in the nature of the work we do, where we're constantly getting hit with problems that we haven't solved before, that's part of what we strive to be able to do, is not just take on what's already known, but take on what hasn't been addressed yet. I think it's really good preparation for that.
Rich, how did that change you? I mean, you entered as a young professional in engineering. You don't talk like an engineer anymore. How did that change you?
So if we're honest with each other, I wasn't probably so well suited. Michigan gave me great training, and I love the College of Engineering. I'm on the leadership advisory board. But at heart, the joke in my family is that my wife was a history major who should have been an engineer, and I was an engineer who should have been a history major. But I just felt like going and getting an MBA just broadened my horizons so much more, and gave me much more of a sense of what I love doing, which, you sort of get a feel for what you have said, which was working in teams, solving hard problems, really feeling like you could have impact in the world. I think I left with a much more confident feel of what I wanted to do to make an impact in the kind of community I wanted to be a part of. And I thought it really was a door opener for me. I thought it would be going in. I can't say it was like a shock to experience that, but it was enormously impactful for me.
So how do you assure the continued value of the MBA and make sure that the school's graduates are not replaced by algorithms in the future?
Oh dear. Well, first of all, can I just say it was such a delight to listen to Rich and Brandy talk about how their MBA has been valuable for them. I mean, I've spent my career trying to help MBA students be effective in their work lives, and it's a delight to hear that collectively we together have had that impact. I think the more, I mean, I actually feel like, and this is very biased because I'm the chair of the management and organizations department, but I think the one thing an algorithm is never going to replace is the people skills and the skills to have and sustain relationships that allow productivity, and sort of getting competent in that and staying competent in that is pretty important. You know, you didn't ask me the, what value or where you should focus in your MBA. And I get why you didn't ask me because I don't have one. But I will note one thing. It's an empirical fact I've noted over the years, which is our students like our management and organizations class, but in our exec ed programs, they're dominated by management and organizations themes. So it's like people go into an MBA and get so focused on what do I need to do to get that first job and show well in interviews. And they forget that what they're going to need over the long term is good leadership and people management skills. And so that you could adopt that early and have that be your focus. That I think skills in that will forestall you being replaced by artificial intelligence, and or you can come back. We like you either way.
Lifelong learning is a reality now. All right. Well, our time is up. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope everyone out there did as well on the future work in the MBA. I want to thank Rich, Brandy, and Sue for their insightful answers to some of the questions. And I really enjoyed the time. And I think you really added a lot of valuable perspective to this topic. So for all of you out there now, this part 2 of the MBA Summit is tomorrow. We'll have our admissions panel with Michigan Ross, Wharton, and Northwestern Kellogg. So join us for that. Meantime, stay safe and healthy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all.